Welcome to the Fintech Founder Journey podcast, the podcast that explores fintech and the founders that power it. We look at how to build better fintech products, better fintech businesses, and how to work on yourself to be more successful in all that you do. I'm your host, Mike Scott, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Nona Digital, an expert firm that consults on, designs, and develops software for fintech companies around the world. In today's show, I'm joined by Naby Mariyam, founder and CEO of Coverhero, and we'll be talking about the massive opportunity that exists in insurtech and innovation at the moment, and how Coverhero is disrupting the space. This podcast is sponsored by Nona Digital. We're an expert firm that consults on, designs, and develops fintech software, and we do it with a level of care and excellence that is rare and difficult to match. Working with us, you get access to a deeply skilled and experienced fintech design and development team with a particularly deep experience level in blockchain. You get the benefit of a team that is big enough for no key person dependencies to exist, but small enough so that you're always close to the principles. And you get the benefit of our reusable component library, which means that we're able to launch your fintech product features sooner than anyone else could at a comparable standard. To get in touch with one of our principals, to see how we could help you to accelerate your fintech project, head over to nona.digital to book a consultation directly. And now onto the show. With me today is Naby Mariyam, who is one impressive woman. If I were to read out her full bio, we would be here for a while, so here are some highlights. With an early career in the hospitality industry, Naby built up and studied through various degrees a strong understanding of what motivates choice in people, and actually started a PhD along these same lines. Naby has been a co-founder of multiple ventures, a lecturer in various capacities, and is an acclaimed keynote speaker and thought leader. As a G20 delegate, she represented Australia in Berlin in 2017, and she's been deeply involved in the startup community, both as a participant and a creator of multiple programs across the US and Australia. Today, Naby's focus is as the founder and CEO of Coverhero, whose vision is to transform and build the kind of insurance that is relevant for our generation and that is simple to understand. Naby was also recently a finalist for the Female Fintech Leader of the Year award in Australia. And in my initial conversations with Naby, I was really impressed at her passion, focus, and energy. She's razor sharp and also just a really nice human. Welcome, Naby. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So before we begin, I just loved your, in my research, I loved your intro on LinkedIn. It said that your passions are salsa dancing, poetry, and insurtech in that order. I just want to hear what you have to say about that. I just love that.
Well, I started salsa dancing about 10 years ago, and it is kind of an avenue for me to disconnect from my very active brain and get in touch with my body and get in tune with my body and be fully present. I think dancing is one of these really incredible things where you have to be fully immersed into the music and also with salsa dancing, it's a lot of fun because you're dancing with other people. And it's just a really playful avenue to just express myself and, just disconnect from all the nerdy stuff that I do.
I love it. And for some reason, we actually have we have a very acclaimed ballroom dancer in our business, and then another young, very cool developer who's taken up salsa dancing, and he just loves it. So
it's amazing.
Yeah,
I just started tango dancing, and this lockdown happened, so I was going to add salsa and tango, but not quite there yet with tango.
I love it. And I can see a whole bunch of content you can create to try and bridge the gap between insurtech and dancing. Okay, with that out of the way, I just thought that was great. So let's jump into this. So let's start with, the opportunity in the insurtech space. How are you thinking about it? And what are you doing through Coverhero and the product therein to take advantage of that opportunity?
A number of things determine opportunity and trends determine opportunity, right? For an opportunity to be there or to exist from a technology perspective and a consumer perspective, key factors needs to be accomplished. And a really good example of that is technology has rapidly expanded in such a short time that allows people to build products and launch products quite easily. With cloud infrastructure, with a lot of these, SaaS platforms that allows companies to build and create new products stupidly fast and launch in the market. Another factor is the consumer trend. So the rise of social media and accessibility to a user base in a very easy, seamless kind of way allows us to connect with an audience. So those are the two big things that we look at as an opportunity. And then we look at insurance and what are the challenges in the insurance. And every challenge is an opportunity to create something new, to look at problems from a different perspective. So in insurance, understanding the value chain problems is really critical to identify where the opportunity lies. So in the industry, you have enabling technology where companies are trying to help insurance companies save money or acquire customers better or cheaper or retain them. So it's all about saving costs, right? Which is incremental optimization. The way we look at it is, let's start from a blank canvas. Let's look at some of the big challenges of the insurance industry, the value chain challenges, the technology challenges, the product design challenges. We can go on and on about all of the challenges that exist. The ultimate goal of creating something for us is delighting and wowing the customer and meeting the customer's needs. And to be able to do that, we had to start from scratch. We had to deconstruct the whole insurance product thinking, the design thinking, the regulatory challenges, the compliance challenges to create something stupidly simple so that customers can buy it, understand it, and use it. And we launched our first product called Hustle, which is a income protection product targeted at self-employed people and creator economy or gig economy, whatever you want to call it. And our vision is to create the world's most sophisticated embedded insurance platform that can understand the human needs and design risk around it, and then protect when those needs occur, and to understand customers' risk profiles better than the customers could, because human beings are very bad at understanding, our risk profiles. So that's just in a quick.
I want to jump in there quickly because you said two things which I think are worth putting together and emphasizing. You said stupidly simple product, and then 2 or 3 sentences later, you said the world's most sophisticated risk management engine and insurance. And the point is, like, I totally relate, because that's the thing, right? To create a stupidly simple product, you've generally got to have incredible complexity, genius, sophistication, let's call it on the back end, for lack of a better term right now. And that's what it's all about, right? To create simple solutions when you're talking about insurtech or fintech, there is a lot of genius and complexity and work that has to go in on the back end, right? So that challenge of creating these incredibly sophisticated models, risk management, actuarial models, whatever it is that you're doing, that interact in a way that is stupidly simple, in your words, that's the genius. That's the hard part, right? And that's what you're trying very hard to do and seemingly doing it quite well.
Absolutely. Simplifying things, it's so much harder to simplify things. It's so much harder to express yourself in 3 words. It's a lot easier to write 1,000 words than write a very simple paragraph and articulate it. So that requires really deep thinking and a lot of R&D that we've done. It's 4 years in the making, and that's a lot of time to obsess about one problem and to build a product around it.
It reminds me of a famous quote. I don't know if it was Einstein or Mark Twain. These things always get incorrectly attributed, but it's such a great thing. He's famously sort of credited for saying, my apologies for writing you such a long letter. If I'd had more time, I would have made it shorter.
Yeah.
And, that's the whole thing. I want to jump into that 4-year comment. So you've got a product in market. You've been working on this for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Many of those years, if I remember our conversation correctly, effectively this was a side hustle, right? Which has now grown into a significant scale up and looks like it's going to enterprise, which we'll speak about a bit later. This concept of side hustle has become very popular at the moment, especially with COVID and especially with a lot of people having a reduction in, let's call it, their set earnings. Talk to me about this process of evolving something from a side hustle into what is now set to become a significant venture with a scale up and some considerable funding. Talk to me about just that process and that evolution.
The journey started with a really terrible life experience that I had in 2017, 2016-ish time. And it was an event around my boyfriend getting very sick, and we had to lodge all of these insurance claims that got rejected. Long story short, it was quite a traumatic experience for me, financially, emotionally, a lot of heartbreak. We ended up breaking up. He was fine, and all these events happened, and that made me very angry with the insurance industry. I think, love is a very strong and a powerful thing. And when you lose something, you want something to blame. And I really blamed the lack of claims that got paid out. It's a very romantic, sentimental story behind the reason that I started the company. And I think that's also kind of what drives me, right? In some ways. And then I fell in love with insurance along the journey. And that caught me by total surprise, because I would have never thought as a young Naby that, oh my God, I dream about doing insurance. But insurance is, I think, a social scientist holy grail and a minefield of discovery and learning and playing with all of the data that is available and the possibilities, right? So we started in 2017. We were accepted into the Qantas Avro Accelerator program. And we started off with the same vision: is how do we make insurance simple, transparent, and accessible, right? And we went off to build a robo-advice platform. Our idea was to aggregate all of the insurance policies in the market and build a recommendation engine behind it so that we could sell personalized insurance. And thanks to our naivety, we had no idea that the insurance industry was built on legacy infrastructure around a complex supply chain and a very broken, fragmented, siloed supply chain with even more complex regulation, right? And then a culture that is allergic to innovation and change. So you cannot imagine a more difficult industry to go and start solving a problem. So then we got into TechCrunch Startup Battlefield that year, which was a lot of fun. In 2018, it was still a side hustle, so I was still teaching at uni and trying to build this thing on the side. And then in 2018, I got sick and tired of Australia because we launched Insuretech Australia in 2018. The market was slow. There was only Cover Genius and Huddle in the market. And nobody also wants to listen to a tiny brown girl talking about insurance either. So on top of technology and insurance, I tick all of the diversity boxes and all of the subconscious biases that comes with it. And it was just climbing the highest, uphill battle mountain.
So I want to jump in there because, when I was sort of, after speaking to you and doing my research on you and the background, I was like, wow, this is interesting. So your background is working with, let's call it top-end cuisine, top-end hospitality. Now, those are things that are easy to make people fall in love with, right? People fall in love with food without even trying. People fall in love with, travel experiences without trying. I don't want to make it sound easy, but it's like, you've just got to put it in front of people and they're going to fall in love with it. And I say that's hard work. You're trying to do that with insurance, which is a very unsexy platform, right? That is a monstrous challenge. And I think it's great because it's clear that you're trying to take this. I mean, you've studied it quite deeply, as I've mentioned, extremely deeply. But it seems to me like you're trying to take this. Okay, people can be raving fans of your product, like they can love your food, they can love your hotel, they absolutely talk about it and share about it. How do I take that and apply those principles of human behavior and social connectedness to an insurance product? Which, for most people, let's be honest, insurance is a grudge spend. But you kind of have to do it. But you don't get excited about it. No one is excited to pay their insurance premiums, right? It's just something you do because you want to be a responsible citizen or family member. Is that correct? Like, is that how you're thinking about this? Are you trying to build products that people absolutely fall in love with in the insurance industry? Or is that just something that is, second fiddle here?
It is creating a lovable product, creating an experience. So in my tourism and hospitality background, was very much involved in experience design and the pleasure economy, which is retail and travel, is based on the principles of this kind of gratification and leisure, which is the pleasure part of the brain. Whereas doing your taxes or paying your rent and paying your bills, you don't get activated in the pleasure parts of your brain. It's a painful experience, right? So fundamentally, insurance falls into a painful category. There is no dopamine release in paying $1,000 and hoping that nothing bad happens, and then you still sit in this like massive anxiety. Whereas going on a holiday is just magical experience. So people are more willing to splurge on holidays and buying expensive clothes than make sound decisions about their financial well-being, plan for their future, mitigate risk, because human brains are just not good at doing that. Right? So we have all of these inherent human challenges. So to then shift the design of insurance to make it pleasurable is what I wanted to accomplish. So looking at all human behavior research, social psychology research, neuroscience research, and then understanding deeply experience design and how do we create an experience that would evoke that emotion inside a person when they look at our product, when they come to our website, when they see our brand, right? So it was all about creating this real, intangible, nostalgic feeling through the brand, through the identity, through the experience, through everything that we do is to like deeply, deeply connect with the end user and then build a technology to be able to deliver on that. So it's a very complex process that we go through.
And it's something I see a lot. We deal with a lot of startups, scale-ups, established businesses, but so we're very lucky because we get a deep insight and diversity of view into how founders are building and scaling businesses, and we see what works and what doesn't work at quite a big scale. One of the things that I see is absolutely consistent with successful founders is, in my words, the way I would describe it is, in the early stages, it's more important to build a product that a handful of people absolutely love than building a product than 1,000 people kind of like.
Yeah.
So that focus on sort of, if you can just sort of prove a hypothesis through a couple of people being raving fans of your product, you're more likely to succeed. I want to just go back to the side hustle, let's call it philosophy or process. So Naval Ravikant is, I believe, one of the greatest thinkers of our time, and he speaks about sort of the surface area of luck and different types of luck and what have you. The side hustle philosophy has grown in let's say, popularity and adoption. And there's a good and a bad side to it. I think the good side is that you're increasing your surface area of luck. You're doing a bunch of things to give you a better chance of success in multiple areas. But at the same time, you're doing something which I think isn't so great, which is you're spreading your focus. So if I'm a pessimist or negative, I'll say you're just going to do more things badly instead of one thing very well. Mm-hmm. But if you're not taking chances, you're not spreading your surface area of luck, so you just kind of have zero chance of success. So I'm just interested to know, while you were thick in the side hustle process, and in my research of you, it sounds like you've got a whole bunch of side hustles. How do you think about this? How are you thinking when you're in that space? And this is obviously not now, because now you're focused on Coverhero. But how are you thinking when you're sitting there and you're a lecturer and you've got this side hustle and you've got a couple of other side hustle? What's happening in your brain in terms of where to put your focus and how to split your focus such that you're not just bad at everything, but you're actually good at some of the things?
So before Coverhero, I had another startup called Ride Hero, which was a rideshare platform. And I always worked on one side hustle at the time, right? And if it doesn't work, I quit. But when I do go in, I go all in. So the academic career was a way to sustain. I was out the door, and that paid my bills until I could quit that and go all in. So for 2 years, I was driving Uber. I was teaching at university, building Coverhero on the side, right? Which was very difficult because you only have limited attention span and energy. And I'm marking 200 university assignments and teaching so many hours and then trying to stay afloat is very difficult. But I was so convinced on the industry vertical. I had such high conviction around the product and the potential I was more invested in Coverhero than what I was doing to earn an income to sustain my life. And therefore, I was I have chosen Coverhero and insurance to be my thing for the next decade. So I had made that decision. But before that, running other startups and doing all of the other side hustles before that, I had no clue what I wanted to do or if I was going in the right direction. So because I have done that before, I knew if the juice is worth the squeeze. I knew when to quit. I knew what to look for to see if there is potential in it. And when I started, people were like, Naby, why insurance? It's so difficult. Like, go do something else. So many people told me it was a stupid idea, that it was never going to work. And I was like, I don't need your validation because I believe in it. And the lens that I am looking at it, you cannot see it. And therefore, your perspective is irrelevant.
And it's so important for that conviction to exist as a leader to attract the best talent in an industry like this, because your talent that you're attracting is going to be difficult to get talent. It's going to be actuarial analysts, it's going to be software developers, it's going to be great experiential design people. And these are difficult talents to attract. And I think one of my guests on my show says something that I somehow end up repeating every single show I ever do because it was so powerful. But he said, there's only two jobs that you have as a founder. The first job is to set the vision and to bring people along with you. And the second job is to make sure you're never the smartest person in the room. Now, when you have such deep conviction about where you're going, that's infectious. People that you're interviewing can feel it. They can see it. They can go, well, if she believes it this much, there's got to be something there. And I'm prepared to follow that, which is interesting. Obviously, you've got to be able to, which I know you can, but you've got to be able to communicate that in a way that other people understand so that you're not just an army of one. But that conviction is so critical. And it's definitely something that I see in pretty much every successful founder that we work with or that I speak to. I want to shift gears a little bit. So you've built a startup, you've got a product, it's in the market, but now you're looking at your next level of expansion, which is into enterprise. I have a lot of opinions on this, but before I give any opinions, I want to ask you a question. What is your experience of the difference as you shift from, let's call it a startup environment into an enterprise serving environment? What are you experiencing as the differences, and what do you anticipate being the differences?
So we're kind of in the middle of that transition right now. And having worked in large enterprises before, one of the things that during the growth pain is building processes, getting everybody across the line on those processes. I think the culture is also very important, and appropriate resource allocation, right? Because in the early days, and I still do this, I wear so many hats, and I've got to be able to wear less hats as the company grows and scales, because otherwise the company cannot scale. It will be 100% dependent on me. And I'm still working through that and trying to find my way, because that's the stage that the startup is at the moment. So relying on my advisors, relying on the investors, relying on the team to figure it out and navigate through. So I wouldn't be sitting here and saying, I know exactly how to do it. I know the path to get there, but I do know it's a messy, iterative process of going from a toddler into a teenager. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. So maybe a question for my own curiosity, but also for the listeners' benefit. When you say you're going from, well, when I said you didn't say this, it was my words, but when you're going from a startup into sort of an enterprise play, does that actually mean that you're going from a consumer-facing interface focus to an API-driven focus? Is that basically what that means, or have I misunderstood that?
Yeah. Embedded insurance, and the concept of embedded insurance is being able to embed the product via an API, right? So that's one part of it. And the second part of it is to be able to do that, you have to ingest the data, and there's APIs involved with that. So more direct to omni-channel distribution is the ability to drop the product into any channel. But on top of that, there's all of the non-sexy stuff that needs to happen behind the scenes from a platform perspective. It needs to be able to handle the load. It needs to be able to scale. with the consumer base. It needs to be secure. It needs to be compliant. It needs to have all of those capabilities and support around it to go from having 10 customers to 10,000 to hundreds of thousands of users, right? And there will be emerging issues that you wouldn't have when you have 10, 15 customers where you can do customer support manually. But when you're preparing for that kind of scale, you've got to have really robust systems and processes and people to ensure that it doesn't fail, right? Imagine a day when Twitter goes down or Instagram goes down, people just like have an existential crisis, right? So when you have a product, when you're preparing for that kind of scale, there is no room for your platform to have a cyber attack or, something to go down or having an outage. There are some real repercussions around it. So it's kind of nice to play small because the problems are different. It's scary to go into the next level. It's super exciting. And we have been in this kind of stage for a very long time. So the next stage is this massive leap of faith, which is terrifying and exhilarating at the same time.
Peter Drucker famously said, all profit comes from risk. And I've spent a long time trying to disprove that. And every time I try and disprove it, I'm just like, damn it, man, he's so right. I can't disprove that. And it's the same thing, right? It's that taking that leap of, you say leap of faith, but let's be honest, it's very calculated, hard work. There's nothing about a leap there, actually. It's just a shit ton of work.
I'm going to speak in poetry.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So Crunchbase tells me that you guys have raised about $450,000 in seed money. That's not a lot of money, right, in terms of technology build. And you guys seem to have done a hell of a lot with that amount of money, unless Crunchbase is just not accurate and you've actually raised a hell of a lot more than that. But assuming Crunchbase is even in the ballpark, that's very impressive to have built, launched, begun to scale, grown a team, a whole lot more with less than $500,000. Talk to me about how you've managed to get so far with so little money. And I'd also love to know about, as you approach your, let's call it Series A capital raise, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot bigger than $500,000, how are you thinking about what kind of money you want to get? In other words, what kind of investors? So just to rephrase that question, how did you get that money to go so far? And how are you thinking about getting more money and from who?
Yeah. It was a very difficult journey because $500,000 across 4 years is not a lot of money. So I bootstrapped it. It's blood, sweat, tears, and love is what got us here. And also it's really helpful that I have talent across multiple different aspects. And therefore it's just my time invested into it. And my plate is stupidly big, and therefore I could do a lot myself. So I did a lot myself over the years and work 15, 16, 17-hour days on end. And sometimes to the point where, I put all of my money into my company where I didn't even have money to eat or to pay rent. And even, got kicked out of my apartment and had to move in with my best friend. And there was 18 months of huge sacrifice. And that's what got us to where we are, because I was not going to give up. That even being homeless wasn't a factor to give up on Coverhero. So I suffered through and I pushed along and kept on building the brand and incrementally, because compounding interest is a very powerful concept, right? Most people would give up at that point and they would go. And I didn't give up. And then we went on to raise. So we raised a little bit of money in 2017, 2018, raised no money. It was just very difficult time. I pretty much lost everything. I remember my son and I just counting, coins to buy bread. It was that sad. And then 2019, things changed. I went and raised a little bit more money to build the product and get the product to market. So we raised in 2 different tranches. So Crunchbase is inaccurate. We've raised a little bit more than that, just under $1 million. But I didn't want to raise money until I had conviction around product market fit. I didn't see the point of going and raising money, right? And needed to get to that point because you got to understand the Australian funding environment as well. The seed market is really difficult in Australia. And for something that is radically different, there are not many believers in the Australian market. And even if there are, it's very hard to find those people. And I have met a lot of believers who are my investors, and they believed and backed the company when it was at idea stage, and they've come along at different stages. So that was very, very difficult. And a lot of believers believed in the idea and did a lot of work for sweat equity and is part of the tribe. I think it's just kind of like we built a community of believers that really believe in what we're doing and just volunteered and supported. I could make a whole list of people that have just helped us, build product design stuff, do all of these things that would cost maybe, $3 million to get to where we are, but it's the generosity of so many amazing people, a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance.
So that's a moving story and not an uncommon one, right? Like when you have such conviction, you'll put it all on the line, which you did and you have. What I want to dig into is, it's easy for people to listen to this and go, yeah, sure, you believed in that, that's great. But when you're actually in the moment, when you're sitting with your son counting change to go and buy bread, but at the same time, you're also saying, but this is worth it. I know that this is going to work. I know that we must push through this. What I want to zero in on the question is, how do you know at that point that it's worth everything you're going through? So if we take vernacular that people understand, maybe it's the pivot or persevere thing. Like when you're actually sitting facing it going, I don't have any money. I don't actually have any data or proof that this is worth doing, but I just know it is. What is it that was getting you through going, this is worth it? Because it's one thing to suffer through things, but it's not sensible to suffer through the wrong things. And you seem to have known that it was worth suffering through. How did you know it was worth suffering through?
It was a very data-driven approach, right? And most people wouldn't look at it that way. So thanks to my background in social science research, I'm very good at analyzing qualitative data and finding trends and building predictive models around what is going to happen in the future. And this is the concept of phenomenology, right? Is understanding phenomena. So when I am not sure, I will always go back into the world and collect data. And that is whether it's observational data, whether it's qualitative data, with the reports that have been published, looking at the trends, looking at the startups that are emerging, companies that are getting funded. All of this information is out there in the world. You can validate or invalidate your assumptions if you know the way to look at the world or the lens of looking at the world. So it goes back to, a philosophy around ontology and epistemology. And those are the two things that I would always look at when I'm kind of like unsure, what is true? What is happening? Gather data around facts. Then there is the unknown of, okay, these are the facts, then how do you connect the dots, right? And that is the most powerful thing about data is there's a ton of data available, but data just out there means nothing. It is the patterns that we draw from it. So I was trained as a researcher to be able to do that. And therefore, I have leverage over those people that might not have that background. I taught research methodology and design at university for, majority of my career. So it's just second nature for me to be able to look at complex data and say, okay, I can connect this dot and this dot and this dot, and this is going to work. This is where it's going. This is what's happened in the future. And that is kind of like that is play for me. It is not even work for me. Like I love doing that. And therefore, if other people can't see it, it didn't matter to me because I know the scientific methodology of inquiry is valid. And therefore, the frameworks that we're creating is also valid. But it's difficult to show something that is not real to a group that doesn't have that inherent background That was the hardest thing, was to convince other people that this is happening.
Yeah, that's fascinating on so many levels. One, that you were able to hold that level of clarity through a very emotionally difficult time. Two, it's what you just said. Like, it's one thing to be convinced of something yourself, but if nobody else sees it, that's a problem, right? Because, first you've got to be convinced, but if you're the only person in the whole world who understands something, you don't actually have anything of value. So like holding those two things is really impressive. So when we were speaking, before the podcast, you used a term, something around like you're building the insurance or the insurtech for the future, right? So therefore, that means to me that you have a vision of what insurance is going to look like in the future that is other to what it looks like now. Where do you think insurance is going? What do you think it's going to look like in the future? And how do we get from where we are to where you think it's going to be?
Let's start with the different verticals, because one answer is not going to suffice for different product verticals. The segment that we're in is personal lines of insurance. So how the personal lines of insurance evolves is going to be very different to commercial lines or reinsurance or claims and all of these other aspects, right? A couple of things that are happening is the availability of data, and then consumer data rights, open banking, open insurance. These are major factors. Connected devices, being able to access the data through those devices, and then the bringing those blocks together to build something, leveraging what is available and collecting that information and connecting that to create an intuitive, smart, intelligent insurance product that can protect a human being real time, right? Like that is the future in terms of what a product would look like. And then distribution, which is another big thing, is in the insurance industry. Insurance industry was built on a broker-led distribution, person-to-person selling. It was not built around technology. And therefore, the industry designed this really standard, complex product that, an average Joe could go and sell to Sally and Adam as a life insurance product, right? And that person would earn a commission and will keep earning commission for the lifetime of that product. Now, this has existed for 200 years, which is a real challenge, because the product is designed for the person selling the product to be able to sell it rather than the buyer of the product. And that has a long way to go for the industry to change. Let's talk about the culprit of it, which is the product disclosure statement, which is like reading the Bible, right? Difficult to understand. Nobody wants to read it. Can we just get a summary of that in like a TikTok video, right? Like that's what we want. That's what consumers want. But it's a legal document. There's all of these rules around it for good reason. But we've got to work with what is possible from a regulatory perspective, then look at what is possible from an insurance perspective, right? If we believe that things are never going to change, things will not change. Change only happens when there are believers that believe in something beautiful, something magical, and pushing for it, and then the regulation will catch up, right? And that's how technology has changed regulation all around the world. So for the future, for personal lines, we envision this really intuitive, magical product that can leverage the data which is out there, where you could purchase insurance from any channel that you're interfacing with, whether it is your business tools that you use or your social channels. Wherever you are hanging out, you should be able to buy the product that is tailored to you without you having to go and look for it, right? The product should come to you. And I think that is the most simple way to explain this moment-based kind of coverage and hyper-personalization is the product should find you and it should be personalized to you. The execution of that is very difficult due to all the problems that I mentioned earlier around the tech, the regulation, the supply chain, and then the thinking of the industry.
So I want to jump, that's a good segue, because I want to jump to the tech execution part of it. That's a part that we play, and it's a part that I selfishly am most interested in this interview. And I want to understand something. So one of the biggest challenges when we're talking about tech execution, the actual design and build of the product or the API or the integrations or whatever you're building, the actual build part, is attracting and retaining and optimizing the people and the teams that you're working with. And there is no set formula for this. Many companies build their own teams and scale their own teams, and that works very well. Many companies keep a very small core team of people to work on their core product, and they outsource everything else because they think they can go faster that way. I speak to all manner of founders within the fintech space, and I never get exactly the same answer, which I find fascinating. What is your approach to getting the most out of your runway in terms of your view towards insourcing your build versus with working with expert partners for your design and development components? How do you address that? How do you play with that? And how do you maximize your outcomes through that?
So far, we've had multiple different models across different sprints. Distributed teams, whether it's tech or design or product or combination, we've used in-house, we've used external. For us, it is with very little runway left, or when you have very limited resources and you need to deliver super fast, get there. There's real value in getting a whole team on board super quickly for that project to deliver, and in the testing and learning kind of earlier stages. As the company grows, I think there needs to be a really robust team, whether it is in-house or external or an extension. There are different models. I like a combination in terms of getting the product done with it inside a team. The team that is designing the product has to live and breathe the culture of the product. And therefore, there needs to be this very strong connection to the vision. The way the teams are structured, I think, matters less. It is as long as you can maintain the vision throughout the team, whether they're in-house or external or distributed or working asynchronously, whichever mode of working is less important than this very cohesive team structure.
Yeah, interesting.
That's what I believe in.
Makes a lot of sense. So shifting gears a little bit, and we'll move pretty soon, just because I'm conscious of time, to some rapid fire questions. But I noticed on LinkedIn you've got a pretty big following. You've got about 16,000 followers. And my question to this is, how important do you think it is particularly as a fintech founder, how important do you think LinkedIn is? Was this following a deliberate strategy that you undertook? And if it was, and if you do think it's important, what are some fundamentals that you sort of follow on or execute to build this following on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it was deliberate. When I first started, one of the things that you need to be successful in anything that you do, you've got to have leverage, right? And to be able to have leverage, you've got to have connection, credibility, and trust. And that is built over time. And that is built through being someone worth listening to, I think, has a lot of leverage. A lot of founders don't use LinkedIn enough to speak about what they're building or what they're doing. And I remember a few years ago, I was one of those people, and I was scared of sharing my thoughts because I was scared of being judged, that I am not smart enough, maybe, imposter syndrome, like, who am I to speak about this? What authority do I have? But the truth is, every athlete, every entrepreneur, when they start, they are that person, right? And through training, you become an expert. So therefore, I wanted to be an expert and a thought leader in the insurance space. I wanted to, and that was so scary to do. So I started building my LinkedIn network when I was going through this really difficult time in 2018. And I'm like, I don't have money. I don't have a team at the moment. What can I do with my time? So I spent a whole year in 2018 building my network on LinkedIn very strategically, reaching out to the media, speaking to the conference organizers, and really building my personal brand. So, and creating this demand by speaking about all of these ideas that I have, and strategically grew LinkedIn through potential investors that I may want to speak to, or potential partners, or journalists, or possible team members. And every week I would have a target for every week on who I want to connect with, and then sending actual messages, organizing coffees. I drank a lot of coffee that year as I was growing. Then it hit this like pivotal moment where I didn't have to do that, where then it started growing on its own. And now it's got to 16,000 of connections, and I have a very strong fintech network and an insurtech network and a global fintech insurtech network, which has helped a lot because, I can just go in and see who is who and ask for an intro, and also for them to find me as well, which is, I think, the most valuable thing is the visibility that it has created. But as the company goes through this growth stage, I have less and less time to do all of those things manually. So now the shift is more around getting together a collective group of people that we want to do business with or to work together with, and really nurturing those relationships, and then expanding it outside of the LinkedIn world in the actual real world, and really building strong relationships with the network.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's everything there is about leverage. Again, to quote or to cite Naval Ravikant, that's what he speaks about, right? Leverage, there's only a few types of leverage. You can leverage people and time and arbitrage labor. You can leverage your network. You can leverage media, and you can leverage money. And LinkedIn for me is quite interesting because it's kind of a double up of network and media. So if you're strategic about it, you can actually get these exponential returns. Another thing I just want to point out for the listeners' benefit, you'll notice that Naby didn't sell on LinkedIn. And I think that's critical. You don't sell on LinkedIn. You offer thoughts, you offer opinions, you give to the network, and it'll give back. And I think a lot of people are misunderstanding that about LinkedIn. I don't think LinkedIn is a great platform to sell. In fact, if people are trying to sell to me on LinkedIn, I pretty much just shut it down. When you're offering views, opinions, thought leadership, content, all of that kind of thing, it's an incredibly powerful platform. And that's what you've done very well and strategically. So Naby, I want to move to some rapid fire questions, which I ask every guest. So you don't have to go into huge detail for these things. But here's the first one. What scares you in business?
Success.
What content are you consuming currently?
Books. I am reading The Almanac and Play Bigger. And also rereading Untethered Soul. I generally read like 6 books at a time. I'm a book reader.
So that's hilarious. Like if I turn around and look at there's the Untethered Soul, there's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and Play Bigger is somewhere there as well. So we have similar reading interest. Yeah. What is the last book that you read cover to cover? So, and I ask that question specifically. It must be cover to cover, because if you're anything like most people I speak to and like myself, you don't always finish every book. So what's the last book you read or listened to from start to finish?
Let me look at my Kindle and I can tell you what that book is. Actually, number of books. One book is called What Happened to You. It's about, so I'm a massive fan of psychology and neuroscience and sociology. So I read What Happened to You cover to cover, Gifts of Imperfection, and also Radical Compassion, The Gift, and another book about neuroscience and meditation. So I've read quite a few books. Mostly psychology books. I read cover to cover if it is in the topic of psychology or neuroscience. If it is business, there's like a lot of common stuff, so I skip through. I also scribble on my books a lot, and it's just I draw models on. I interact with it. I feel like I'm having a conversation with the author of the book whenever I read it, and then I turn it into mine, I'm like,
I love that. I love that. I can't help myself. The Untethered Soul was written by Michael Singer.
yeah.
And I think the book was fine, but his lecture series is phenomenal. So he has a lecture series on Audible in 4 parts. It's very long. It's like 40 hours. But I found that, the Untethered Soul is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But I found his lecture series about the Untethered Soul to be much, much, much more rich and deep. So anyway, next question. What is something you're going to be doing in the next 7 days to improve yourself or your craft?
Well, I just started doing this course at NYU. Aswath Damodaran is like my biggest crush at the moment around valuations and studying. It's called Advanced Valuations and reading all of this stuff and watching the videos and just obsessing over valuations and that's like I wake up at 4:00 in the morning. I'm watching all of his YouTube videos, reading the textbook. Yeah, super.
Love it. No obsessive personality with you at all, is there? Right. Cool. So, look, Naby, we've spoken about a lot of stuff today. It's been fantastic.
There's an interesting quote. I had it like at the top of my mind. Find something that you love and let it kill you.
We had that up in our office in Cape Town for years before we gave our office up because of COVID.
Amazing.
We literally had a picture of some dude with a big cigarette in his mouth and a drink of whiskey. But I love it. I absolutely love that quote. So Naby, as I was saying, we've crossed a lot of stuff and it's been fantastic. But if there's just one single thing that you would want the listeners to take away from today's conversation, what would that one thing be?
Spend time with yourself to find out who you are.
Mic drop on that point. So, Naby, it's been fantastic. It's been educational. It's been inspirational. It's been surprising, to be honest. It's really been great. Look, Naby, you definitely like to be followed. On LinkedIn is probably a good way to follow Naby. But do you like to be contacted? Do you want to give out any kind of contacts for the listeners, or is LinkedIn the best channel?
If what I said resonated with the listeners, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I am very responsive. I will totally ignore you if you start selling stuff to me. But if you want to have a conversation, have a dialogue with me, I'm always open to it. I may not respond straight away, but I will get to it. So, and also go and follow me on LinkedIn so I can go from 16,000 to maybe 20,000.
There we go. Naby, it's been fantastic. And to the listeners, I hope you got some value from today's show. I definitely did. I think the main takeaway from me today from Naby was around figuring out the indicators that you need to lean on when things are difficult to know how and when to pursue and carrying on to persevere. So Naby, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you making the time and sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To the listeners, thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to discuss your fintech project with a team of experts in design and development, you're welcome to book a call with me or one of the principals on our website, which is www.nona.digital. And I'll be back next week with another episode to explore the Fintech Founder Journey.